In this installment of Chosen Idea, we're at the park for the long overdue time-lapse episode. What am I doing a time-lapse of? That, hopefully. Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of this thing I call Chosen Idea. For those of you who are new, my name is Marko. I'm a creative generalist. All that means is I've been lucky enough to get paid to do a bunch of creative stuff throughout my career. I've learned some things along the way, and now it's my chance to pass those things along to you guys. Maybe you guys will teach me a thing or two along the way as well. Anyway, in this episode we're going to talk about time lapses, which seem to be getting more and more popular all the time. And it's no surprise because most of us carry what we need to do time lapses with us in our pocket every day, and that's our phone. Some of you have even bought special apps for your phone to make your time lapses on your phone more professional. But what about if you want to take your time lapses to the next level? Well, I put together a checklist just for people like you, and well, here it is. First thing that we're going to want to do is look at the equipment that we're going to need. I know, we've been doing time lapses on our phone. That hasn't costed us anything, but if we want to go past our phones, we're going to have to, get past our phones and use something else. And the first thing we're going to want is a camera that can shoot RAW. Next, the camera's going to have to be able to go full manual. Then you're going to need an intervalometer unless you've got one built into the camera. Next, you're going to have to make sure you've got enough memory. Time lapses can take a lot of space. After that, it'll be an external power supply to make sure that you can run your camera over an extended period of time. Some cameras can do a pretty long time lapse on their internal battery. Mine isn't one of them. An ND filter or neutral density filter if we want to drag the shutter. More on that later. Last but not least, you're going to want a solid tripod. Looking at some camera settings is the second thing that we're going to want to look at when we're getting ready to do some time lapses. The first thing that we're going to want to do is switch everything to manual. This may seem a little bit counterintuitive because of all the cool functionality or automatic functions a modern camera has, but switching everything to manual is going to ensure that we have consistent exposure, white balance, and focus from shot to shot. If we have any variables in any of these areas when we're doing a time lapse, it's a really difficult thing to fix later in post, if not impossible. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is switch everything to manual. The next thing that we're going to want to do is make sure that we're shooting in camera raw or raw format. The reason for this is that we want maximum flexibility for adjusting our images afterwards in post. Although this is the third part of the checklist I put together, in fact, this is probably the most important one, and that's choosing your subject matter. If you haven't got anything moving in your scene, there's really no point in doing a time lapse of it. I know this seems a bit obvious, but you wouldn't believe how many people sit down to do a time lapse in front of something that hasn't got any movement in it. Well, it might be movement that's so slow that we can't see it, and that is actually a great reason to do a time lapse because it's giving us a perspective on the world that we wouldn't normally see. Those are some of the most captivating time lapses where we're seeing events unfold before us that would normally happen so slowly that we wouldn't see them with our own eyes. We'd have to see them through the eyes of a time lapse. Anyway, another thing that makes time lapses captivating are those which enhance movement that's already very chaotic or quick. And the model here is my girlfriend Marmar. I'll have to admit I did this one with my iPhone. Things that happen really slowly over time that make for great time lapses might be like a snowman melting, maybe a flower blooming or turning to face the sun, or maybe some clouds rolling over some mountaintops. Use your imagination. There's so many things that you could do time lapses of that haven't been done yet, so keep your eyes open for opportunities. The fourth section of our checklist is the second most important to consider, and that's the interval or frequency. There's nothing that ruins a time lapse like choosing the wrong interval or frequency, or the number of shots that you take for a given number of seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, months. So you get the idea. Anyway, A good rule of thumb when choosing an interval is that you want to err on the side of an interval too high rather than too low. If an interval is on the high side, you're going to just have a lot of raw data to deal with later, because remember, we're shooting raw, or you're going to fill up your SD or CF card a little bit faster than you might want to. Now, if you have an interval that's too low, you're going to end up with a choppy time lapse, and there's nothing that you can really do afterwards in post to fix it. Here's an example of a time lapse with an interval too low. I underestimated the speed that these icebergs were moving in Iceland, and as a result, I wasn't able to use this time lapse later in my video. I knew before I started shooting this episode that the most important thing I was going to leave you with was some sort of a rough guideline as to what intervals you might want to use for different time-lapse scenarios. Now, here it is. Remember, this is just a rough guide. None of this stuff is set in stone, so as you become more experienced, you're going to want to use your own creativity and this guide together to come up with the right interval for you. Number 5 is another way we can exercise some creative control over our time lapses, and that's by dragging the shutter. Finally, yes, I'm going to explain dragging the shutter. Dragging the shutter is why we need that ND filter that I mentioned earlier. Dragging the shutter just means we're keeping the shutter open longer than we normally would to blur things that are moving in our scene. And leaving the shutter open longer means you're going to allow more light in. That's why we need an ND filter to cut back that light so we're not getting overexposed frames. And for those of you who've watched my other videos, you know that ND filters are sort of like sunglasses for your camera. Here are some of the reasons why you would use dragging the shutter in your time lapses. This is a time lapse I did from the roof of this building, and you can see that the people down on the city street have kind of a blur behind them, and the clouds in the background are relatively sharp. And that's naturally because the clouds are moving a lot slower than the people are. But that would bring me to the first reason why we would drag the shutter, and that would be just because it looks cool. Another reason we would drag the shutter is when you do have fast moving things and slow moving things, and you've got an interval for the slow moving things that's actually quite low, and you need a way to smooth out the motion of the things that are moving fast. So you've got sort of this visual equality between the movement of things in your scene. And well, that's the second reason why you would drag the shutter. And the last reason you would drag the shutter, or the last reason I know of that you would drag the shutter, is because of birds and bushes. I put birds and bushes together because they both fall into the category of dragging the shutter to obscure things to the point where they're no longer a distraction in your time lapses. And birds are definitely a distraction in your time lapses. For anybody who's done time lapses of clouds, you'll see these little black things popping in and out, and those are birds because they'll be flying so fast that they're in one frame, out of another frame, so they just show up as these little black spots coming in and out. The only way to get rid of those is to drag the shutter to the point where they no longer exist, or to go into individual frames and retouch them out one by one. Now, the dragging the shutter thing, it's a lot easier, but it does have its disadvantages over going in and removing the birds one at a time. If you're removing the birds one at a time, you don't have to worry about obscuring anything you don't want to obscure as well in your time lapse. So there's something to think about there. When I say bushes, I mean all kinds of foliage, including trees and grass, anything that's affected by the wind, because those can be a distraction in a time lapse as well, because they move very quickly and they tend to have a flickering appearance, which can be very distracting in a time lapse. And ways to handle that would be to crop things out entirely that are flickering like that. Like you'll see in this example in Costa Rica, where I'm doing a time lapse of a volcano, and in the foreground there's some bushes and stuff, and I end up cropping into the volcano tight enough that I eliminate them all. At the time, I didn't know I was going to be doing a time lapse. It was a sort of impromptu thing, so didn't have an ND filter with me, and this was a way of getting rid of those distractions. So you're all done shooting and you're thinking to yourself you've captured the greatest time lapse that's ever been seen in the history of time lapses. But you're not done yet. The next thing we're gonna have to do is take those to the computer, convert the raw files, and then move all that stuff over to our video editor or compositor. So it's time to fire up Helmet. That's my computer. All right, I know you're thinking this guy's taking too long. Let's jump into Photoshop. Call me crazy, but it might be a good idea to have some images in here, so let's open some. I'm gonna hold the Shift key down to select all of them. Depending on how fast your computer is, this might take a while. At the top left in the film strip view, I've got my first image selected. You don't have to use the first image. You can choose the most important image in your sequence and then migrate the changes from that image to the rest of them. I'm gonna just choose the first one because I'm just focusing on the clouds, and the clouds are really pretty much the same in all of these. And the clouds is what I'm gonna focus on because it's what's moving in our time lapse. I'm gonna be a little bit heavy-handed with the clarity. I'm gonna bring it up to 80. Bring up the dehaze probably to about 20. Boost up my shadows. I'm not going to get too crazy with this because I like to maintain my shadows. I don't like those HDRI sort of looking images where the shadows are non-existent and the highlights are non-existent. I am going to boost up those shadows just a little here. Then I'm going to do some overall exposure, increase it, being careful not to blow out the clouds. And then I'm going to take down the highlights just a little bit to bring the detail back into those highlights. Okay, when I'm happy with that, I'm going to go back to the top left. I'm going to choose Select All from the drop down. I'm going to go back to the drop down, select Sync Settings. I'm going to keep all these boxes checked because I want to migrate all the changes here in this list. I'm going to go down to the bottom left, hit Save Changes. Here I can choose a custom location to save my processed images. I like where this is right now, so I'm going to keep that. In the file type, I'm going to keep the format as TIFF. I want to keep a non-lossy file format. And then I'm going to hit Save. At the bottom left here, you'll see the progress. It's going to let you know how many images you've got left. So we're going to jump into Davinci Resolve right now. You can use the editor or compositor of your choice. Anyways, it's about time I get going because I'm not really in front of anything right now. All I've got is this LED light here with the blue gel on it. And so it's about time I get some real work done. Okay, I've got a new project open in Resolve, and the first thing that we're going to want to do is make sure that we've got the frame rate to what we want it at. Now, I'm going to work at 24. I'm going to go to File, Project Settings, and make sure it's set to 24. Now, you can work at 30, 60, whatever you'd like, but make sure you do this first because you can't do it later once you've started working. The next thing, we're going to want to drag our media in. The nice thing about Resolve is that it immediately recognizes our sequence as footage. I've got the whole thing in my viewer here. I like to be able to see the whole thing in one shot, but you can zoom in and out of it from here. And now the cool thing is here that we've brought this in without any prior scaling, which means that Resolve is always going to reference that high-res file that we started with. So that gives us the creative freedom to punch in or zoom in on this almost as much as we want because we've got those huge frames that we shot originally. So now I'm going to want to set start and end frames here. I'll show you how I do that. So at the beginning, I'm going to want a nice frame. Now once I'm happy with this framing, I'm going to want to set keyframes by just clicking on these little diamonds here. Then I'm going to want to go to our end frame. Okay, let's see what we've got here. Hey, that doesn't look too bad. Alright, now we're ready to go to our deliver page. Here we can choose where we're going to save our final file. And make sure you're exporting at a frame rate that you created your project at as well. I'm right in the middle of downtown Toronto, and the Raptors just won Game 4 of the NBA Finals, so I have to stop while everybody passes the windows first here, yelling, screaming, and yeah, anyway. Well, hopefully you got something out of this one and you're all excited about going out there and creating some awesome time lapses. If you choose to subscribe, make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when these videos come up again. If you did get something out of this video, please hit that like button, or not. If you've got any ideas for future shows, please put those in the comments below. And remember, keep working to make your chosen idea a reality. And until next time, peace. Are you still there? I'm glad, actually, because there's one more time lapse that I wanted to include in this, and I was afraid that you took off already. Anyway, I'm going to have to sit really still for this one, so just hold up.